Welcome to this week's episode of The Higher Self. We're in a different studio because I'm in LA right now, and I had an opportunity to bring on this guest, and I wanted to take it because this guy is known as the human ayahuasca. Welcome, Peter Crone.
Thank you so much. It's a little known moniker. My bigger title is the mind architect, but in my
that.
peer group, human ayahuasca.
I love that. I think some people call me the human mushroom.
Okay.
So we might have some things to discuss.
We got some like weird trips to talk about.
A little bit. So let's start with the basics. How did you get into this work? What about your life's path led you to this work?
I think anybody who's gotten into a position of like at least wanting to make a difference and help others, just sort of sharing from my own trials and tribulations and all the adversities I went through. It started pretty young for me because my mum had passed of cancer when I was 7. And then my dad went to work one day when I was 17. He worked on the ferries between England and France and Belgium. And the boat capsized, and he sadly was one of about 200 people who passed. So
oh my God.
From 7 to 17, mom and then dad, and I was an only child. So I was very abruptly thrown into the experience of loss, and that became my narrative for a while. And then I started to, as we do, self-fulfill on the fears that we all carry. And so I attracted a girl that I fell in love with. She left me, which then, of course, was the catalyst for me to feel the loss again. And actually was very transformative because I saw that I'd never lost anything and changed that whole dialogue. And so that was the start back in, it was about 26 years ago now. But and then I sort of felt like Neo in the Matrix a little bit. I got to see the code,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow, this isn't about anything to do with the external world. The external world is simply just the catalyst to reveal where we arrive with these constraints of fear, and the objective is to transcend them.
That's absolutely correct. So let's start with the first one because what you just said is so deep. You mentioned the fear of loss, and then I didn't lose anything. And it was interesting because I was here to do a little stint on a news station to talk about loss. There's so many people who've lost their homes here in the fires.
For sure.
So so for someone like let's say that just lost their home in a fire, they might hear you say, I didn't lose anything. I understand what you mean. What do you mean?
For me, in the context of my parents, it was the distinction, and it seems like semantics, but it's important in terms of our own experience. Like if I live in the story of I've lost my parents, then my own personal internal terrain is going to be that of scarcity, lack, something's wrong or missing. And that denies our inherent nature, which is everything or complete. There's the integrity of who I am at the spiritual level can't be, excuse my French, but fucked around with, right? So then there's what occurs on the manifest level. Form comes and goes. Like even as we've spoken for not even 5 minutes, our bodies are different, right? Because millions of cells are dying and new cells are being born, a sense of cell replication, right? So what I realized is, as hard as it still was to actually embrace, was my parents died. I didn't lose them. Right? I wasn't like at the shopping mall and couldn't find them or something, right? Like, so it seems, again, as I said, semantics, but it's important to understand the distinctions in the way that we speak that create or perpetuate our own suffering. And so as soon as I realized I hadn't lost them, they died, the suffering that was associated with something missing dissipated, right? And so now I could look at it, okay, well, in the world of duality, if I'd lost something, then I equally found something, right? Which was the experience of really unconditional love, particularly from my dad, for which I'm immensely grateful. And I think that set the foundation for why I care immensely about the work I do, is through osmosis, I got to imbibe his sense of unconditional love. So there was also the finding of that, right, in the story of loss. So in the world of duality, everything has to coexist. So I had the blessing of an incredible father, albeit only for 17 years, but relative to some of my friends whose dad at the time was still alive for 70 years, it's like, and they were never told once they were loved, who had it worse, So that was very transformative for me to be able to get out of the story and the narrative of loss. Even a friend of mine who was so sweet, he would always send me a card on the anniversary of the ship capsizing and my dad dying, just saying, I'm thinking of you, love you, and proud of you, and all, which was beautiful, but it was also perpetuating the woe, And I think grief is beautiful. I'd say grief is another form of love, right? Just in a different expression. And so that's an important part of my process. But then I wanted to stick with the truth. I didn't want to stay in a story of loss. So that really opened up this whole conundrum of the power of words and how, abracadabra, I don't know if you know what that translates to.
I've heard it several times, but it's a spell that you're placing on yourself, basically.
Yes, its actual Aramaic translation is, as I speak, so I create.
That's right.
So our words literally become the spelling, to confirm your point, about how we create the reality we live in. So if I'm living in the story of loss, then that's going to be my experience. It's like Henry Ford had a great quote. He said, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right.
That's right.
And so that really just opened up this whole conundrum for me of the epidemic that is human suffering and why people struggle. Of course, circumstances can be immensely challenging. You're talking about people who've gone through just this devastating experience here in Los Angeles. But nonetheless, as Viktor Frankl said, it's not necessarily the circumstances, it's the meaning we attribute to them. It's what we do with that, right? I often, for myself, thought I was a victim of circumstance. Girlfriend leaves me, I don't get a job, I can't afford food, whatever it is. But none of us, I would say, are actually victims of circumstance. We're victims of perspective.
When you say none of us are actually victims, I like to think of it as, we are a victim for as long as we stay in victim energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you can transcend that victim energy, you step into creator energy.
Yes.
And you actually see how your soul created the circumstances that your ego judged as pain, but that you actually attracted them to help you heal the parts of you that needed to heal.
Absolutely. We're on the same page.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Yeah. I mean, Carl Jung had a great quote. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you'll call it fate.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where that victimhood comes in, for which we have compassion, right? Like some people go through heinous, abhorrent experiences, especially as children.
Yeah.
And I don't want to condone any of that. But nonetheless, to your point, yes, I would assert, just a perspective, that the soul that we are does curate the events of our life in order to be able to receive the reflections it needs to be able to transcend the constraints with which it arrived to land on its own integrous divine nature.
I love it.
One of my more popular quotes that gets bounced around on social media, I say, life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free.
That's right, 100%. And then the question becomes, will you allow yourself to see that that's what's happening, or will you stay in woe is me energy?
Yeah.
Because for as long as you stay in woe is me energy, life is going to keep presenting you the same exact thing. And it'll probably even get harder and harder because it's trying to wake you up.
Yeah.
And then Peter, I hate using the word believe because I'm not a believer of this. I've done enough work with the medicine to know that, if in this lifetime you don't get that lesson, then you just come back.
Hit repeat,
and you do it all over again.
Yeah.
And the memory gets wiped clean.
Yeah.
And you're just constantly, perpetuating until, I love Dr. David Hawkins' work. The scale of consciousness,
Power
until you reach
force.
Enlightenment.
Yeah,
and you get to that beautiful space where you know that God is I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you would also probably love his work if you're not familiar with it, Nisargadatta, who is he wrote the book I Am That.
No, I'm not. But okay. I want to,
Sri Nisargadatta, he's phenomenal. He was like this traditional Indian guru, but I loved him because he had an edge about him, right? Like Ramana Maharshi and these typical, even the more contemporary teachers like Wayne Dyer or Eckhart Tolle, there's a sort of sensibility about them where they're very genteel in the way that they, whereas this guy was smoking cigarettes. He's like, you just believe in some bullshit story that someone told you, it's like, it's a powerful book, but...
First off, remind me that I want that one. But it reminds me of Osho also.
Yeah, exactly.
Osho,
similar. That whole story, the Wild Wild Country. Did you ever see that? That was nuts.
I did. Let's get into that because what I go to when I see again when you're in judgment, you look at that and you look at a cult leader, you look at a guy that was probably having sex with everybody and listen, I'm gonna say, and you see something wrong with it.
Yeah.
And yet what I looked at was the people when they asked, what was this experience like for you? And they're in tears.
Yeah.
They're in tears because they were free.
Yeah.
He showed them how to be free.
That's my main product I tell people. I literally have a membership platform called Freedom.
I love that.
To help people find freedom in all arenas of their life, health, wealth, relationships, and purpose.
I love that.
Yeah, so that to me is the raison d'etre of being human. We're not here to amass money, build a family, to get more followers, get some sort of status in the workplace. We're here to transcend the constraints for which we arrive so we can discover true freedom.
That's right.
Yeah.
So how does, we were talking before we came on, my journey in spiritual growth took me through plant medicine.
Yeah.
Right? That was for me the catalyst. What
Yeah.
was yours? Your parents' death.
Yes,
then
that was catalytic in terms of at the time, ways I didn't fully understand. Right, so I was just in a state of grief and shock and pure survival as a 17-year-old who had no resources or means to take care of myself. So it was really that story of loss, particularly with that first girlfriend, which is again about 26 years ago, where I thought, I don't know if I would have phrased it this way, but she was the one, right? There was a significant amount of connection, attachment, possession, love, as best as we know when we're in our 20s. And so when she left, I went into this sort of somewhat state of devastation and like, oh my gosh, am I going to find anyone like that again? Is she seeing someone else? Like, where is she? All of these questions that were sort of ruminating in my mind, keeping me up at night. And it took a few weeks, maybe close to a couple of months. But then for whatever reasons, life saw fit to give me the answer to all the questions. Like, where is she? Is she dating someone else? Will I see her again? And it was just, I don't know. And it was simple. It was so profoundly simple. 3 words that changed the entire course of my life. Because at that moment, I realized the very nature of life is uncertainty, but the very faculties that we're given as humans with the primordial imperative to survive is that we're always trying to work out what's going to happen.
Sure.
So my questions were based in the insecurity, wanting reassurance, but the nature of life is there is none.
Yeah.
And so you got this huge conflict, right? So human brain wants to predict and protect, but life is, no, you don't know what the fuck's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I then met life as opposed to being sort of attached to my own thought processes. And I felt freedom just cast through my body that I'd never had before. And what was really powerful is she called me within 15 minutes of me having that moment. I hadn't spoken to her for almost 2 months. And now she's crying, saying, I miss you so much.
Wow.
And at that moment, I understood entanglement theory. I recognized that consciousness has no time or space. And that she, unbeknownst to herself, it wasn't a conscious process, I became literally available to her. Because before I was too busy about not losing her. Of course, my own unconscious process, right? My fear had me be the perfect boyfriend and all of these coping strategies to try and avoid the very thing that we tend to fulfill on, right? Fear will break its own heart, I tell people.
Yeah.
And so, but that was the catalyst for me to see, holy shit, like it's all us. It's all us.
And so then you drew in, right? The very thing that you were afraid to lose and that you were mourning once you let it all go.
And absolutely. But the irony is at that moment, the relationship had served its purpose, right? So
absolutely.
She came back for a little while because there was still a lot of love and affection that we had for each other, but I was quite literally a different human being. So
from a moment.
Like in a split second, yeah. It wasn't progressive. It wasn't accumulative. It was instantaneous. So at that moment, no, of course, there's been countless other forms of refinement and other intuitive downloads that I've gotten and insights that have shifted the course of my own understanding and the way that I teach. But that moment was a paradigm shift. It was like I literally moved into a different arena, a different dimension of what it meant to be human, where I was no longer preoccupied with the energy of survival, where the brain's coping strategy is to always try and calculate, predict, and figure out, speculate what's going to happen as a means to trying to garner security. I was like, well, that's futile. Right? Even when people say I'm scared of the unknown, no, you're not, because the unknown's the unknown. What you're scared of is what your own brain, based on past hurt and fears, is predicting could happen in the unknown. And when you get that, it's like, holy shit, like people are actually scaring the shit out of themselves based on their own imagination.
I love that. Wow.
Yeah, so I just stopped playing that game.
I love that.
Now, of course, it creeps in from time to time over the years, but it's pretty much redundant.
How does this manifest? I'm gonna talk about the 3 energies of human mastery.
Okay.
Right? Money, sex, relationships, and health.
Yeah.
Let's start with money.
Okay.
How does this show up in our money life? One of the things that I know, abracadabra is real.
Yeah.
And so often people use words like, I can't afford it, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are they literally doing to themselves when they think that, feel that, and then speak it?
They're just confirming their own reality of scarcity and lack. And beneath that, probably a sense of inadequacy, that who they are and their own perceived self-worth is
not enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then you get to be right, fight for your limitations and they're yours. So when people feel that they can't afford something, or it's too much, or I don't have the money, it's just a reflection of their current reality. It's not a truth, right? So I distinguish the difference between someone's reality, which we honor, we have compassion for, versus truth, right? I didn't lose my parents, but when I was in the experience of loss, my friends, family, everyone cared about me. And they're like, we really understand it. There's compassion. But then when I transcended, they said, no, okay, I can love the shit out of my parents, and I miss my dad still today. I wish he was around, especially to see what I'm up to. But I didn't lose him. So once we transcend out of that reality, then literally the frequency of who we be creates a new circumstance. So for someone saying they can't afford something, or people say it's too expensive, I look at that word and I love to play with it. I say, well, is it expensive, or is it an opportunity that is expansive?
That's right. Is there medicine in it?
Yes. Yeah. So it's not like if I wanted to go and buy a 650 G6 jet or whatever, Gulfstream, and it's like, I don't even know what it is, 55, 60 million,
Talk
right?
To me.
Yeah, right? So people go, oh God, that's so expensive. It's not really.
No. It's expensive relative to where you're at,
yes,
where your consciousness is right now.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity to help you to expand to the level of consciousness that would be, and energy that would be required to live that life and afford that jet.
Yeah, because I often give this example, like I don't know who he is, but if the Sultan of Brunei was given a Ferrari, he'd be like, give it to my brother, because maybe he has 6. It's like there's no value in the Ferrari, right? It's, again, we like anything from stress to worth to love to value. We bring that to the world of matter.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a collective agreement, that someone will say this particular diamond is worth whatever, and people will fight over a watch or a woman or a car, or there's an agreement on what is valuable, but it's not an inherent value.
Yeah.
So when people start to see that, they're like, oh, I'm curating my own experience of worth, usually commensurate with my own sense of self-value.
Did you know that natural flavors are far from natural? Or that some vitamins are derived from GMO corn syrup? This is why it's so important to trust who you're buying your supplements from. And there is only one company on planet Earth that I trust, and that's Kono. I've never seen a higher standard in the industry where all of their products are third-party tested, and they focus on growing organic ingredients with sustainable farming. They have a functional pre-workout that I've replaced coffee with. It is that good. It uses an organic guayasa tea that's the most antioxidant-rich source of caffeine on planet Earth. It's grown in an ancient chakra garden in the Amazon jungle. Just saying that feels awesome, doesn't it? You guys will feel the difference of this product. It provides me mental clarity, energy, and with 0 jitters at all. Check them out right now at kononutrition.com/Danny and get 25% off your subscription from your first order, or 10% off any regular purchase. Again, that is kononutrition.com, and use the code Danny. Often when we do these podcasts and these interviews, we kind of talk prior. And I shared with you, what happened and how I attracted my wife. And I said that all I wanted was, I wanted someone that was beautiful on the outside, but that was beautiful but didn't know it.
Yeah.
And you were like, wow, that's a great way to put it. And you said something along the lines of, because oftentimes beautiful women and beautiful people put all of their value on the outside.
Yes.
Have you found that here in this third dimension that the culture, the society is literally programming us to keep us in the external?
I don't know if society's doing it as a direct agenda. I mean, there's obviously a lot of agendas out there in the world right now that I'm pretty outspoken about, but I think it's just a byproduct of the way that our equipment is designed, right? So with the 5 senses, they pull us externally. Right? What we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we touch, it's all out there. So it's almost like, imagine, when they started to introduce 3-dimensional movies, it enhanced to a certain degree the experience of the viewer, because now there's another sense involved, right? So you're even more enraptured in the movie. That's a movie. That's 3-dimensional. But we're humans, we're 5, and we could argue 6-dimensional. So we're really bamboozled by the outside world. We really think that because somebody said something that was, critical, judgmental, or offensive, that's why I'm hurt. So it makes sense then as a means of self-preservation that then we want to try and manipulate and control the outside world because we think that is both the catalyst for pain and pleasure. We're primal animals. We just want to enhance pleasure and avoid pain. So yeah, I think it's just a natural byproduct of what it is to be human, which we're under the impression, albeit like illusory, that my state, my internal terrain is because of the outside world, not realizing it's actually the opposite.
The opposite, yeah. So you just kind of snuck in there. There's several things that I'm outspoken about. I forgot what we were talking about, but instantly in my mind I said, "Ooh, what are those things?"
That are taboo to talk about.
Yeah. Well, there's things. There's programs happening in the world. There's efforts happening in the world.
Yes.
To cause us as a collective. To think, feel, and act. A certain way. Yeah. And you mentioned you're pretty outspoken about them. I'm not outspoken about them. Okay. So for me, it was like an introduction.
Got it.
To have this conversation.
Okay. Well, maybe you can join being outspoken.
Let's do it. Yeah. Maybe. Yeah.
Well, the last few years I think have been just abhorrently evident, in terms of what's going on with the whole virus that everyone was, scared shitless of, and don't touch your Amazon box, and then. Them talking about they're going to give a vaccine, which is not a vaccine. It's an experimental gene therapy that was rushed through. And we could argue, especially now with all the data coming out, that it was a bioweapon. And, there's millions of people that have both been harmed and also passed because of it, literally killed, And then if you look at the people behind it, so, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that the computer geniuses of the world that are apparently health experts are talking about reducing world population. So in one hand over here, it's let's reduce world population, and over here there's a syringe. It's like, you do the math. Right. So that's something. Obviously what's going on with smart cities, and the WEF, World Economic Forum, with their 2030 agenda of you'll own nothing and be happy. It's right there. I mean, it's called revelation of the method, right? In the dark satanic circles, they have to tell you what's going to happen, and people are going to buy into whatever they want. It's like each to their own, but if you start to go down one or two rabbit holes to any sort of decent depth, it all makes sense.
It will, if you allow yourself.
Yeah. I just literally posted, I said, it's cognitive dissonance, because I truly believe that the majority of humanity, and by that I mean 99.58 to 9%, like the majority are just good people.
Yeah.
Humans who are here as souls incarnated to get beyond their constraints, their fears, their limitations. They want to raise a family. They want to go on a vacation once or twice. Hopefully they can, afford like a couple of nice bits and pieces for the house. But they're not really trying to intentionally bring harm, right? And then you have this small, albeit like insanely powerful, albeit not in the traditional, like real form of power. Like it's not a power for good, right? It's a manipulative ego power, external, exogenous power, who truly are so malicious that it's jarring for people to think that something like what we just witnessed in Southern California could have been absolutely planned. They're like, no, this is climate change. It's like, no. It's hard. Like people are like, no, and that to me is one of the, I think as sad as it is to say, that's one of the greatest edges that the dark forces have, is that people are just too good to believe that somebody could be that evil.
People are so trusting.
Yeah.
I was with my manager just now, and we were sitting down, and she said, everything happening here in LA, I watch MSNBC, and they were telling us all the time how, I'm just going to say how Trump was the bad guy and and this and that.
It's always his fault.
And she goes, I feel bamboozled. And I go, well, and I was really sensitive to it because I once was there as well.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's because you have been.
Yeah.
You have been.
Yeah.
And I said, you have to understand that when you constantly get your information from one source, and that source is constantly telling you one thing, they're telling you that for a reason. They're telling you that because they understand your state of consciousness right now is so trusting, which is a good thing, but it can be harmful. It's so trusting that you will believe, think, feel, and then act, vote however that source is telling you to vote.
Yeah.
And until you wake up and at bare minimum, step back and go, could there
Just
inquiry.
Could
there be some sort of hidden agenda.
Yeah.
Right? Like, why are all of them trying so hard to get him arrested and to make him the bad guy? Like, why could there be, and could it be possible? I don't know, maybe, could it be possible that he is actually a good guy? Yeah. Could it?
Yeah.
Like, and if you start with could it, to be honest, that's where my spiritual journey began.
Yeah.
Like, I was so driven, to believe religion. And I started asking could it be that this isn't the truth?
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of courage to ask those types of questions.
Of course, especially when it's been indoctrinated over many generations, and the firmer the dogma, usually the more fear.
Yeah.
And so for a kid, it's like, God forbid that you actually question, what your parents have been telling you for decades. Like, it's like, that's blasphemy, right?
That's right.
So, no, I'm glad that you look at it. I mean, if you understand, like, the world that I traffic in terms of, like, understanding the mind and how you can, quote unquote, control people through language and psychological operations. I mean, the mass psychosis phenomenon, they're real because they work. As beings, we have these primal needs for safety, for worth, for connection. And so when you have something like a virus and you strip those away, people will be desperate to do anything, right? Like, you can't see it. It's fucking invisible. So now people lost safety. They're scared. They're in fear. That's awesome. That's
you're taking my money away.
Well, you're taking my self-worth away because I'm not, what was the word? Not an essential worker.
Yeah.
So you minimize somebody's own sense of value. And then you can't see your poor dying grandpa. You can't go and watch your wife deliver in the hospital. So now you're creating that fissure in terms of a real bond. So that exacerbates the feeling of separation, which is the hypertrophy of, the second law of thermodynamics. You put someone in solitary confinement, they fall apart. So you got the trifecta of what it is to truly leave someone in a desperate state of survival.
And then you give them the answer.
And here you are, just go to CVS, and you'll even, according to the fucking disgusting mayor of New York, eating a burger and fries at 8 o'clock in the morning, you'll get a free fucking burger. You don't like that? Don't worry, you get a free donut.
To the Yankees game.
Free donut or a blowjob at a freaking brothel. It's like, it's insanity.
One of the things I love about this podcast is that it gives me an opportunity to ask a question that I want an answer to, right? And yet I think it'll help a lot of us. Because I have purposely shied away from all of we're on the exact same page.
Yeah.
The exact same page.
Right.
But I don't talk about it. And I don't talk about it because my ultimate mission is to help people heal.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so what happens within me is there's a fire and there's a passion in there to speak about things, potentially from my ego. I don't know. But mainly to help offer people a different perspective, and for those folks that are like, could it be?
Yeah.
For them to listen to somebody that they trust, that was going to bring them a different perspective, right? And yet my ego says, but if you do that, then half of them won't ever come to the event, won't ever heal, whatever.
Yeah.
So I know there's something going on inside of me because there's a freedom that wants to be born to just be me, right? Do your ayahuasca man stuff on me. Like what is the story that I've got going on?
I think, like most people, going back to what we were talking about, the sort of preoccupation with external circumstances and how we're perceived, right? So you're obviously a very sweet guy. You're a family guy. You're a dad. You're a husband. So that speaks volumes about the fact that, and you have this show. So you're somebody who cares. And so when somebody has that preoccupation with wanting to do the right thing, and I don't know much about your childhood, maybe you'll talk about it, but, I see you being a very sweet kid. And so the preoccupation is like, who must I be to make sure that everybody else is okay?
That's,
right? And
100%.
Right?
I was responsible for everybody and everything.
Yeah. And so that conditioning is still obviously carried through your nervous system. So now you have a platform doing what you do, and you touch the lives of a lot of people. But I would say it's still, sort of the governor on your own potentiality, right? Because if you can't speak your truth, then ultimately everything is a subtle form of a lie, which is a hard thing to hear, right?
No. I get it.
So, I mean, what's his name? Peterson. Jordan Peterson. He said something like, for some people they feel like it's not safe to speak up, but he said it's a lot more dangerous not to, right? So, in terms of self-expression, that to me is one of the pillars of freedom. Right. So if you're, and again, I really appreciate you even offering to, expose yourself or your own ego in front of me. So I would just say, it's the worrying, what people say when they're worried what other people think about them. But if we go a layer deeper, you're not worried about what other people think about you. You're worried what you think about you. And then you're using other people as the excuse. So then that's where you can start to mine a little and go, oh, wow, what must Danny's view of himself be that he's a little bit, and it's human, preoccupied with saying something that is a truth but doesn't want to for the fear of the ramifications of what people will think of him, which when you really break it down, you realize, well, it's about rejection, which is the feeling of the loss of love, right? We all ultimately... Because the primal sense of belonging is one of the drivers for every human being. That's why love stories and relationships are such a pivotal part of everybody's narratives. But if you start to see that you're worried what other people think about is you worried about you, that means that actually the thing you're worried about, which is the loss of connection, you don't have because you're actually only in a relationship with your own narrative.
I get you. Yeah.
So I always joke with people, they say, oh, I'm scared of rejection. I'm like, well, yes, but give somebody else the opportunity to reject you before you're constantly already doing it.
Right. Right.
And they're not rejecting you. They're just saying something. Like, if you go to a girl in a bar and it's like, hey, can I get your number? No. Okay, fine. Yeah. You weren't rejected. She just said no. You could see her the next week and it's a yes. Or you meet somebody who's better. Like, this is the trust and patience of what it is to be a human being who's not living in fear.
I get that.
Right? So for you, I think it's beautiful that you're willing enough to be vulnerable, which I would say is a step in an evolution, just like we're talking about expensive and expansive, in your own self-expression. It's like, wow, there's a part of me, because I care, that I don't want to offend people. I want to heal. But we could also argue that there's a misinterpretation of what it is to heal in that argument, right? Because what you're saying is healing is not to be associated with hard truth or tough love or your own self-expression.
Right.
It sort of implies a little bit, what I hear as the subtext is that your healing can only be the mollycoddling and the nurturing.
Well, it's interesting, Peter, because when I'm at my event, I let it rip.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, I just smack them in the face with it. And at the end of day 3, they're like, thank you for it.
Yeah.
It's more on social media. It's more in these types of conversations.
So what I hear is there's going to be some sort of entanglement with your own survival mechanisms around career, around livelihood, right?
Yeah.
So then that reveals the scarcity model where you don't get your own abundance.
This is fucking good. Yeah.
So you're then perpetuating the own sense of lack, and you're using, again, the excuse of cancel culture. I might offend people. Somebody might say something derogatory on my post, And so that's then being equated with a loss of value, which is all on the human level. Your inherent value can't be touched.
That's right.
And in fact, the purity and the truth of who we are, especially when we come for our own sense of authenticity, is undeniable. It doesn't matter what people think at that point. It's literally somebody saying something, they're making noise.
So the deepest part of this conversation for me as a human being is, I came from a very religious background. I came from a world where I literally thought I was a sinner.
Yeah.
I literally thought that Jesus was coming to save me.
And
I literally thought that if I didn't believe this dialogue, that I was going to go burn in hell.
Exactly.
And that is obviously 100% not true.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
It is the constant conversation that I have in my head that I want to speak out to the world.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And yet, potentially, yes, in past, it was coming from a charge of anger, possibly anger at myself for believing it in the first place. So maybe I need to forgive myself for that and understand that it was perfect. But also, I remember I had a moment, it was not in ceremony, but I had a moment that was so profound when I felt like spiritually I was pulled out of the energy of believing that God was separate than me, that it was rough. I had a borderline panic attack by myself. And luckily, because I had been in ceremony, I knew how to handle it. And so then the ego goes, but what if you say it and people have that moment and you're actually hurting them? I'm still finding a sneaky way to not be my truth.
It's beautiful. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because it's one of the things that I speak to relatively, as compassionately as I can, because when it comes to religion, and politics, these are obviously very entrenched narratives that people become not only believers of, but identified with.
Yeah.
Like someone will say, no, but I am Catholic, I am Jewish, I am Muslim. No, you're not.
No, you're not.
You were born, you didn't even know your fucking name when you were a baby as a being who exists in this dimension,
right?
Let alone what is a religion, or what is my color and team of religion. This is after the fact, right? This is accumulative over time. So for you to see that and have that profound, albeit, as you said, a little bit unnerving experience where you become disassociated from that, this is why people fight for their beliefs, because it's so wrapped into their own identity.
Yes, that's right.
The you that you are for yourself is what I tell people. So because you're being such a sport and being so courageous and vulnerable, I would also say one of the predominant prisons, I talk about these 10 primal prisons of the subconscious, which I'm writing in my book. But the one that I hear for you is, especially as it's, so closely wrapped into religious dogma, is don't do anything wrong. Right? So that's one of the prisons, is like, as a human being, we're sort of wired at a very deep unconscious level to not do anything wrong. But it's completely subjective, because what does that mean, right? So, but within the context of what I now understand about your upbringing, what I hear is, in not wanting to perhaps just be fully self-expressed on this platform, okay, you do it in your live events, that's great, is the fear of the ramifications of really, in a bigger context, okay, hurt someone, offend someone, get canceled, lose money, lose sponsors. Really, it all belongs in the same bucket of, Danny doesn't want to do something wrong.
Right. And can I tell you what they tell me all the time?
Sure.
That I know is in the back of my head somewhere. It's like when the real Danny, when he steps into, and I'm sharing this because of the real you, right?
Yeah.
When we step into our truth, our truest essence, that's when everything grows.
Absolutely.
And that's when everything expands.
Yes, and that's what I was saying, because like when I said earlier, if you're not telling the truth, then subtly everything is a lie. If you're in a form of pretense, then you're not connected to truth or life, therefore you can't create or manifest powerfully, because it's a pretense. Like, did you see V for Vendetta? It's a great movie.
No, but
Oh, okay, watch it, yeah. So V for Vendetta is a great line by an actor called Stephen Fry. He's British, and he plays, it's all about, basically it's a, where art is informing life and life is informing art. Like, this movie really is reflective of certainly the last 4 years of what we've been going through. It actually talks about a virus and how they injected people. It's pretty scary when you look at, oh, wow, this is a film, but really it's real life. But he says, you wear a mask for so long, you forget who you are.
That's right. Yeah.
And so in that pretense and the disassociation from your true nature, which is, we could argue as a very simple physical analogy, when we wear shoes, we've become disconnected from earth, right? Which is why the whole phenomenon of grounding and putting your feet on the sand, or why you go on vacation, and oftentimes people feel better. Okay, fine, they're out of the fluorescent lights and the artificial lamps of an office and stress and emails, but they're also putting their feet on the dirt, on the sand, right? Silica is going to be able to transmute all of those negative ions back into their body, right? So anyway, so grounding and separation, there as a very tangible physical, but also for your true self, if you're disconnected from your own intelligence and your own truth, then you're not going to have the same degree of like authentic power, not the opposite, the opposite to what I said earlier, like external power, which is ego power, trying to control, manipulate, dominate. So for you, it feels like you're sort of stuck in molasses a bit, when you're in that ego, which is self-preserving, right? It's based in fear.
Yeah.
And
I'm accepting because it's the truth.
Yeah.
I feel it. It's almost as if, even financially, it's like, it finds a way to show, because it's all entangled.
Of course.
All the energy is the same thing. And so we do really well, but not as well as I know that I know.
It's one of my, biggest gripes. And certainly when I work pro athletes, I used to have this sort of charter sort of thing that I wrote, and I would read to all my athletes before a big performance. Like, I had a girl who went on to win a gold medal in show jumping. I've had one of my MLB guys won the MVP for the whole National League. We've made it to playoffs and all-star games, and it's been fun. And a guy who got a podium finish in the Olympics, like, that he'd never had before. And it's really a tough love, form of like, listen, playing it safe, as they say, is the riskiest way to live, right? So I'm really appealing to the part of them that knows their potentiality is waiting. That is the opportunity that it is to be human, right? Mm-hmm. People half-ass life in every arena, and that's not even a judgment. It's just an observation.
Right.
But then people wonder why they don't have the lives they want when they're not fully showing up. They're not really committed to their relationship. They're not really fulfilled in the workplace. They're definitely not, responsible for their own health and well-being. And that's okay. Like, it's okay. But then don't complain as to why your life's not working.
Right.
Right. And so to really show up and be fully alive is what I'm passionate about, and helping people. And again, it's slippery, right? Because they don't know what they don't know. So there's compassion, right? I often say people can't be held accountable for that which they're oblivious to. So if you're in a world of, I'm not wanted, I'm not safe, I'm not loved, and it's a blind spot, then of course you're going to take choices and have actions and results that are commensurate with that, right? You'll attract somebody who's a little abusive, or they don't honor you. You'll have a job that's middle management because it's in alignment with, I'm not good enough because dad or mom said, well, what happened here? And you're never going to amount to anything. Mm-hmm. And you're still playing that narrative out. Yeah. But really the opportunity, as far as I'm concerned, to be human is to transcend those constraints and really tap into the brilliance of what it is to be you.
Yeah.
That's the game. And you can't do it if you lie.
Yeah. In order to not miss these episodes or the weekly clips that we provide that will help you in the 3 energies of human mastery, how to change your financial life, how to change your relationship life, and how to heal yourself physically, emotionally, and spiritually, make sure to subscribe right now to the channel. Trust me, it'll be the greatest decision and action you take today, because the value we are committed to bringing you is going to be life-changing. Go ahead and subscribe right now. It's interesting to me. I do want to go into the situation with the fires, but it's just incredible to me that when I look at Newsom and I look at the fire chief and I look at the mayor, I look at those 3 people, it is incredible to me that, like, in the world of leadership, when you drop the ball, you own it.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
But then when you're in the world of leadership and your decisions and actions are being counted on by millions of people, and then your lack of leadership and decision impacts the lives of millions of people, in the world of leadership, if you have any honor, if you have any self-respect, if you have any humility, if you have any love for the human beings whose lives you've damaged and hurt, you leave immediately, and you accept full responsibility. That's what a leader does. A leader goes down with the ship. You know what I mean? And it is incredible to me that I see the opposite from these 3 people. I see, like, they're just kind of like riding the wave, and they're thinking, eventually they'll forget. And I think that the citizens of LA need to not allow that to happen.
No, I mean, well said. I'm not sure there's much to add to that because, unfortunately,
See, now being the real me.
Which is beautiful. No, I mean, the whole thing to me is, if I were to wrap it up in a word, it's just disgusting.
It is.
It's, to me, it is categorically clear that this is nothing to do with Mother Nature and everything to do with man manipulation, right? This is
power and greed.
To whatever the agenda is, whether it's 2028 Smart City, the prelude to the World Cup and the Olympics, there's so many lies afoot here. The cascade of synchronistic events that were devastating, right? Like the reservoir that's empty, the fire hydrants don't have any water, the fact that he vetoed a bill that would have brought millions of gallons of water. The fact that the insurance companies pulled out a couple of months ago, it's all so convenient. The fact that there was a fog a few days before, which, as far as I'm concerned, was all the toxicity that makes everything inflammable. It's like you just add it up. You don't have to be a rocket scientist at this point.
You don't.
So that's the thing where, again, I said, even on my platform, I said, the cognitive dissonance is real. Like, because I'm appealing to the goodness of people, that they find it so unfathomable that some people could be so sinister and evil. And I get that, because I was one of them. I was like, even with my own work, I could see, okay, a guy who's a little bit abusive, God forbid physically, but certainly emotional to his wife or his girlfriend. I have no time for that. If that was my sister, I'd beat the shit out of the guy. It's like I'm a stand for.
Right.
I mean, I know that sounds hypocritical, but you get my point.
Yes.
Is like that just doesn't work, right? But if I knew that he was beat to shit by his dad over and over because he didn't get the 5th run at batting practice, or he didn't get the A, okay, I have some compassion. Doesn't condone his behavior, But it doesn't mean he's evil. He's just been, conditioned to be someone who's driven by aggression and domination and anger.
Yeah.
So that's how I would at least reconcile. Sure, take people out of hostile, abusive situations and then hopefully do some recuperation with the person who's the abuser. But now I'm like, no, there's actually some people out there who are just genuinely evil.
Yeah.
Like, they literally are merciless. They will do whatever it is that they believe is in the good of their own agenda, and it doesn't matter the impact, which is just, it is even for me mind-boggling.
And now you got me started. I saw a clip today where I think it was the Speaker of the House was mentioning something along the lines of, he said, I've had, so many, like, to me, Biden wasn't the president.
No,
he was not in any way, shape, or form. To me, Biden is an individual who you wouldn't hire to be your assistant. To think that he was the actual president, he wasn't the president of the United States for the last 4 years.
No.
Now, there's a clip that I just saw where the Speaker of the House requested time with him. And he kept requesting and he kept requesting and he kept requesting and he kept requesting, and they wouldn't give it to him. And in not giving it to him, finally they gave him an appointment, and Pelosi and Schumer and all these people were around him, like basically controlling what he would
Handlers,
say.
Yeah.
And he says, Biden finally reached over and says, I just, could I just have a second with the speaker? And then they had to leave because they were like, what is he going to say? And he said, Mr. Biden, do you realize what you're doing? Do you realize what you signed into effect? Do you realize that by you signing this policy into effect, I forgot what the issue was, but, we're going to put America in danger and at harm. And we're going to, he's like, no, but I didn't do that. Mr. Biden, yes, you did. Yes, you did. No, I would never do that. No.
Yeah.
And they said, Mr. Biden, it's literally what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And they said, no, I signed something saying that we were going to be like, just bring more oil or something. And that's what he says. He literally was being bamboozled.
Yeah.
To think and believe that he was doing things that he didn't even realize he was doing.
I think a perfect example
of
that is
evil.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's just, again, as a society, I think it's incumbent upon all of us, rather than point fingers, to see, where am I naive? Where am I being hoodwinked by my own, self-fulfilling prophecies of my beliefs of righteousness or whatever, because as a species, we're really pretty fucking dumb, right? Like, we harm ourselves, we harm our loved ones, and we harm the planet that we live on. I mean, if an advanced civilization landed here, which they probably will or have, these guys, they're a fucking bunch of idiots, this species, right? So for me, it's easy to point fingers. And yes, I concur with everything you said. I mean, if you want to look at just one very simple example, as soon as he got into office, all the executive orders that he signed, one that every human being with an ounce of conscience would say, that's retarded. I know that's a horrible word to use, but, he got rid of Project Talon, which was something that Trump put into office, where there was a task force that was to get rid of all illegal sex traffickers, right? I mean, that seems, I don't even vote here, right? I'm a resident, I'm not a citizen. So I'm like, that seems like a good idea. So he got rid of that on the first day. Now, that doesn't make any sense as a father, so I'm sure he's oblivious to what he's signing. So yes, but I think it's much more important that we all look at ourselves and, where can I be the frequency of love? Where can I be the vibration of harmony? Where can I exude peace and acceptance in my own sphere? Because it's easy to get animated, and it's like the armchair quarterback who, thinks he could, with his fucking side of nachos and Diet Coke and his big belly, do whatever the quarterback felt to do. It's very easy to judge. And I like to, as best as we can, if we're really going to evolve into a slightly more advanced species, we want to look at who are we as a form of contribution to the collective dysfunction, right?
I love that.
And that takes a big person to go, okay, to be causing the contribution that I am to life, right? If somebody's in a state of suffering and then they're complaining about the world, then they're only exacerbating their suffering. If you can just take care of your own little internal terrain, your own garden, go, okay, I'm going to be a human being who's contributing to love, who's contributing to peace, who's contributing to freedom, so that, albeit minuscule, I'm nudging the needle away from dis-ease and fear and limitation into the world of freedom, love, and possibility by my own efforts.
Absolutely.
Versus asking everyone to change around me so that I'd be okay. That's a form of manipulation. But it takes a big human to want to do it that way.
So when you say as a form of manipulation, how does manipulation show up in relationships?
Every day.
Every day, right? And often, we think we're doing good.
Yeah.
We think we're giving, we're loving, we're being pleasing, but in actuality, we're manipulating.
Very much. Yeah, it's all about survival and self-preservation. And we, the almighty I that we become misidentified with, this I in our head with all of its conditioned beliefs, thinks that so-and-so should act a certain way, or that something should have gone differently. Wherever there's the world of should or have tos or needs tos, and there's this language that is based in resistance, it's like we're declaring, albeit unconsciously, that I'm the center of the universe and I know how everything should be and how everyone should act, especially my spouse and my parents, right? And you start to see the audacity of that perspective. It's asinine, right? Like, I didn't get the memo that, Danny's in charge of the world and how everyone should act, right? But that's what the ego's doing. It's like, I know that what you did was wrong. And so, again, it's subtle. And again, I have compassion because I work with all sorts of people from all walks of life, and people are doing the best they can within the level of their awareness, right? But we want to enhance their awareness so that they can start to be more responsible. But the human brain, or the ego particularly, just wants to be right because it's, one of my quotes I say, being right is the poor man's version of self-worth. So if we can be right about something, at least we feel good, because underneath it, invariably, we feel insecure, we feel inadequate, and we have a sense of scarcity. So we're going to grasp at straws. If we can make someone else wrong, which is, the antithesis of love, especially it's usually within the family dynamic, right? Oh, this is my spouse. You did all of the vows in front of hundreds of family and friends, and you're like, I love this person. But behind closed doors, you're a bitch, you're an asshole. It's like, it's just, again, it's antithetical, and it goes against everything that we're all trying to experience, which is that true sense of freedom.
Yeah.
So there's so many layers to what it is to be human, and and that's why I have compassion. But I love to help people see the error of their ways, or the pretense of their own ego that is really just perpetuating its own sense of limitation, which that's no fun for anyone. And then you wonder why people get sick. Dis-ease, the absence of ease, will cascade into physiology, and eventually people get sick, Yeah.
So I want to ask you a personal question.
Sure, go ahead.
Because I don't see a wedding ring.
No.
And it's interesting to me, but I feel like I may be completely wrong, but when I listen to somebody like Osho, for example, like he was completely free.
Yeah.
And I get the sense from you that part of that freedom is, well, let me just ask you this. What are your thoughts on marriage?
I think it's like anything else. It's a choice, right? Now, of course, it's got bigger ramifications, and the significance of it certainly occurs to human beings as being more, there's more importance to it, right? You make vows until death do us part, and it is under the pretense usually, or the precursor to maybe developing a family and creating a space for kids, and these are all very vital parts of the human experience. But for me, it's almost like it doesn't really matter what we do as humans in terms of the choices we make, because I'll come back to how we started this conversation. It's always going to reveal where you're not free. So oftentimes I find that marriage is wonderful because it creates a little bit more tightness in the container, so that when the shadows and the trials and tribulations come to the surface, which they will, it's not so easy to just quit. So I think marriage, for that reason, is a wonderful container, because those people who are less readily equipped or willing to look at their own shortcomings and their own limitations, it's not as easy just to get out of jail, and go past 100 or go past whatever, go and get $200 or whatever Monopoly is, right? Like, you've committed, right? And so I think there's something beautiful about commitment in that regards of marriage. I think, there's so many other sort of anecdotal parts to marriage, and societies and laws and taxes and money, but I think it's beautiful. I think real freedom, I was talking to a friend about this, with regards to myself too, and they're like, you just seem so free. Would you ever really settle down and get married? And I was like, well, yeah, quite possibly, because that's got nothing to do with freedom. See, people think being free is I do whatever the fuck I want whenever I want to. No, that's selfishness. That's impetuosity. That's ego. Yeah. Freedom is actually about the power to choose.
Yeah.
So if somebody chooses to commit to somebody from a place of freedom, now most people don't because they're still in a reactive mindset versus creative, right? It's reaction to, well, my fucking parents have been on my back for so long, this guy or this girl is good enough, or there's the pressure, we dated for 4 years and this is what we're supposed to do next. And it's not actually created from the ripeness of pure potentiality of this moment with no like extenuating circumstances. That's not how most people choose anything, right? So for me, true freedom is when we have choice. And then if it's choice, it comes back to because I say, it's abracadabra, that I declare that this is my wife, my husband, whatever it is, my life partner. And then I'm going to honor my word.
Yeah.
And so when we give honor to the things that come out of our mouth, realizing that our words create our reality, people become a lot more responsible with the shit that they say.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So that's my take on marriage is I think it's beautiful. I think it's a container that has led to so many incredible life experiences, memories, obviously the birth of so many beautiful human beings, and a shit ton of adversity that invariably, hopefully, is the catalyst for people's awakening. Unfortunately, oftentimes that adversity becomes the excuse for dysfunction and abuse and harm and derogatory, dismissive comments. You know, that people use that as fuel for their own internal dis-ease, like the superimposition of my own wounds that, you know, you're the problem, you're the one that hurt me. You know, that's child's play. You know, that's just being oblivious to how, like, you actually generate your own experience of life. But so marriage, jobs, whatever it is, you know, whatever you got to do, it doesn't really matter. There you are. You're still going to come up against your own limitations.
That's right. How do people get a hold of you?
Instagram, Peter Crone, so my name, just everywhere. Peter Crone, and Instagram, TikTok, website, petercrone.com. Okay. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Danny, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for speaking some of your truth.
For sure. Thanks for giving me the space to. It felt good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt good.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. That's it for this week's episode. We'll see you next week on The Higher Self.